Good morning. If you'll let your Bible fall open to Ecclesiastes 3, we will stay there this morning, and we'll pick up again there this evening, as I'll make this a two-parter, and we'll, by tonight, have gone through verses 1 through 15, but 1 through 11 this morning. Seems like every Sunday I, and along with you, appreciate very much those who lead us in our worship, their involvement. Troy did an outstanding job with the text. And Daniel with his prayers, they're always heartfelt. They're always very well worded and very thoughtful. And I appreciate that so much. Kelvin, with the Lord's Supper, gives us time to think about things. I watched a little video a few nights ago of Jerry Barber on Facebook talking about one of the things that we've lost during COVID, since COVID, is the Lord's Supper. And what he meant by that is, well, he gave an example of a congregation that he knew about or had visited, where the brother who did the Lord's Supper, as Kelvin does here, or did here, that the brother gave you 7 seconds to ponder the meaning of the bread, 7 seconds to think about the meaning of the cup, and that's about it. And that was his point, that we've lost the Lord's Supper. These little packets that we use now, that's okay. But to have time to ponder and think about what that means is so vital. We should never let anything take it away from us. Use that time to think about the sacrifice of Jesus. And Brad leads singing. We have excellent song leaders, every single one of them. But when Brad is back to lead singing, it's almost like Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis are back together again. Now, I'm not going to say which one's Jerry Lewis. Both might qualify here. All right. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Verses 1 to 15, but verses 1 through 11 this morning. I know that Ecclesiastes is a strange book in some ways. It is different. It's poetic literature. For that reason, it is different. It's very challenging. I used to think Ecclesiastes was a simple book, and I've grown up to learn different. It is not a simple book. It is not easy to interpret in many places. Some places, yes, but not in all. Ecclesiastes is one of those books, you read it, and you wonder, why is it in the Bible? Why did God put it there? To make you wonder through and struggle through some of the terminology that's there. And as you read through the book, you're greeted with the word vanity so often, that so many things are vanity. Well, okay, that sounds a little bit negative, although I don't believe the writer intended it that way. So the book of Ecclesiastes is one of those books that gives you a hard, fast view of what life is all about. And I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever been to the point of basic human understanding of trying to grasp, why are you here? What is your purpose? What is life all about? Have you ever wondered about that? Have you ever pondered it? I would suspect most of us have. There might be a few of us, those questions just go about like that, but for the most part, you're probably one of those who has pondered such things, and if so, then Ecclesiastes will speak to you. And it will speak to the rest of us too, because of the fundamental questions in life, we better nail this one down as to why we're here, what our role is, what is our task in life, and what's everything all about. We better get that right. And that's what this book is about. This is a book where the writer, and I'm going to refer to the writer as Solomon. And I know that not everybody agrees that Solomon is the author of it. I understand that. But I'm just going to reveal my shallowness here. And I can be shallow in a lot of things, but I'm just going to refer to Solomon as the writer. Okay. And somebody might argue with me about that, but that's okay. It's okay. Solomon probes into the questions of what is it that drives us? Why are we here? What's the purpose of life? Why should you go about your life being busy as you are, doing all the things that you do? Why does it matter? And in the end, is there really a purpose beyond the here and now? Is there something beyond the fact that the sun rose today and you're greeted by a new day? And you go about your life just as you always do? And I know this is the Lord's day and we come together to worship on the Lord's day. But tomorrow, if the Lord gives us another day, is Monday, and you go on about your business, as always, day after day, year after year. Do you ever ask the question, does it matter? And if so, how? Solomon writes with a purpose here, because he will struggle through all of the things of life, and he knew them probably better than most people. But he had a little sense about him as he gets to the end of the book, because at the end of the book, he's talking to you young people. And we've got some young people here, and I'm going to point the finger. And young folks, he's talking to you. And at the end of it, here's how he's rounding all of this out as an address to young people today. And here's what he says in chapter 11, verse 9. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth. Be happy that you're young. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all of these things, God will bring you into judgment. Not many young folks know that. But now stop and think about it. Enjoy life. You're married. You've got young children. You're bringing precious little ones into the world. Your work is going well, I pray. Enjoy every bit of it. But know that God will bring you into judgment. And then in chapter 12, the classic statement, remember now your Maker, Creator, in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw nigh, when you say, I don't care anymore. Now, the last part of that was my own translation. You'll forgive me. Or maybe you won't. But that's his purpose. Now, when you read through Ecclesiastes, you think, well, the book has something of a negative tone, and some will say it's got a lot of negativity. And you wonder, well, is Solomon, is he a man of God? And you wonder the things he says, and I'm here to say to you this morning, he was not an atheist. He did not come across as an atheist. He was not a skeptic. But he knew what life was all about. And he knew firsthand what it was to question what matters in life, what's important. And why should you do that? And he lived life enough, just like the rest of you, to understand. You know, there's some things in life that you just cannot answer to your satisfaction or to that of others. There's some things in life that are just bizarre. And you can't figure these things out. And if you are, as he uses the expression quite often throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, under the sun, if you look at life just under the sun, if what you see is all you know, then you are confused. Because, yeah, life under the sun, you know, if that's all there is, then what does it matter? And that's what he's getting at here. But there is more than under the sun, right? There's a lot more than what meets the eye. More than the physical strains of life. So, we're going to look at chapter 3 here. We're going to work our way through it a little bit and try to help ourselves to see what Solomon is getting at. If you're trying to figure everything out, if you want to make sense of it all, and I would guess that all of us do, then let's take a peek at Ecclesiastes 3 and see what we might glean from it to help us make sense of it all. Because the most tragic thing in life is when people who ought to know better do not figure out how to make sense of it all. And they struggle in the most serious ways and have to come back to square one to try to make sense of it all. So this chapter is going to help us a little bit. The verses that are ahead of us will help us to work our way through it a little bit, maybe. So let's look at it this morning in terms of trying to make sense of it all. And we look at verses 1 through 9 here, and I'm not going to reread all of that. Troy did an excellent job with it, and I cannot improve on that. But like it or not, there are seasons in life. Life is the way that God made the world is full of opposites. There's good and there's bad. There's bad and there's good. And that's what you have in verses 1 through 8. And you have 14 opposites here of good and bad and good. And you go through life and you wonder, well, why does Solomon include the things that he did there? And I don't know. But to me, it's just a well-rounded picture of the way God made the world. We're in a world that's like this. And yeah, all of this is what's going on. But what I see out of it, or in it, is that there's both positive and negative. There's good and there's bad all the way through, down to verse 8. And when you get down to verse 9, it's very easy for us to be just like Solomon, to throw up your hands and say, why does it matter? In verse 9, what profit has the worker from that in which he labors? You spend your life working, laboring. What profit do you get from it? Well, maybe you're able to retire, maybe you're not. But you come down to verse 9, you're kind of like Solomon. What profit is there in all of the opposites of life when you really get down to it? You wonder and you're frustrated sometimes, and you say, why should I try so hard? I mean, look at verse 2, for example. You plant a garden, and some kid walks through your garden plucking up your plants. All right. Or a storm blows through, uproots everything you've done. Wow. And then you look at verse 6. You keep a lot of things. You store up a lot of stuff that's important to you. But you know what? When you pass from the scene, the next generation is going to throw it away. That don't mean anything to them. And then you look at verse 8. Time to love and time to hate. You love, and you try to show that love. And you find, in some cases, it's met with hate. Okay. And you wonder, well, why do I try? You know, you're kind of like Solomon in verse 9. What profit is there in trying to work through all of this stuff? And you find out, you know, the world is a big place, and there's a lot of stuff going on that you can't handle, you cannot control. And Solomon, it seems to me at least, for the first time in his whole life, realized he's a little fish in a big pond, and there's not anything he can do about all of this. And so in verse 9, you throw up your hands and you say, well, what profit is there in all of this? Now, it gets better as you look at verse 10. And in verse 10, there's a God-given task that you have and that I have. And here it is, verse 10. I have seen the God-given task with which the sons of men are to be occupied. All right. God-given. Not humanly formulated. God-given. That word task. Brad used the song that I selected because it has the phrase in it, my task, my task. This crown's my task. Well, that word task means work. This is my work. You work to make a living. But there's a work that's more important than that. And that work that's more important than that is God-given. So it doesn't come from you, it comes from God. And you're here to perform it. Solomon was, so are we. Now, what is my task? Why am I here? That's the question of this book, you see, and that's what we're getting down to. But what's my work here? My work's the same as yours. And our work together is to work in the Lord's vineyard. Like we dealt with, I don't know what, 2 or 3 weeks ago or something like that here, in Matthew 20, 1 through 16. You're employed in the Lord's vineyard. And you come to the end of the day and you're paid the same as everybody else. And the Lord said to the workers, toward the end, later in the day, He said, I'll pay you what's right. I'll do what's right. And they all receive the same. And it's a matter of grace. That's your task, my task, to serve and work in the Lord's vineyard all the days of our life. And we'll receive what's right from Him. And our task and our job is to teach people the gospel and take as many souls to heaven as we can. And that's why Jesus in the Great Commission said, go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be condemned. It boils down to that. That's my task. And never to give up. As Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:58 exhorted the Corinthian church, so I exhort you, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor, your task is not in vain. So you don't come to the end of it, and like the writer here in verse 9, throw up your hands and say, well, what use is it? No, there's a task that's God-given, and there's a profit that goes along with it, and there's benefit to be had, not only for you, to fulfill you, but others who hear and understand the gospel. That's your job, your task, your work, and just as we pointed out here in chapter 11, he said, young folks, enjoy life, but understand, God's going to bring you into judgment. And that message carries forth into the New Testament to realize, I'll be judged by what I've done in this body, good or bad. And as in Revelation 20 and verse 12, there's the picture of the dead, both small and great, standing before God. And the books are opened. And the book of life is opened. And the dead are judged out of the things that are written in the book of life, you see. And they're judged according to their works, your task. That God-given work that you have to do, are you doing it? Are we doing it? So there's a God-given task that belongs to each of us. Solomon knew that. And I think he felt a glimmer of hope in view of that knowledge. But now we look at verse 11. Here's what is unique to humanity. In verse 11, He, God, has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. In verse 11, here's the value of that work. That God designed us a certain way to enjoy things in their time. And everything's beautiful in its own time. And, you can appreciate that beauty and you can revel in it and praise God for it. And then also, you realize that God has put eternity in your heart. That means that you look at things differently. That means that you don't go through life just satisfied with what you see. That there's more than that. There's more than just what's below the sun. You're bound by time. You're wired for eternity to realize, your day-to-day work life. There's more to it than that. You might even be like Tom Brady. I read that Tom Brady, back when he was still playing for the Patriots, was on 60 Minutes. And he was asked the question, how's he handling all of this newfound fame? And at that time, he only had 3 Super Bowl rings, and he was making a mere $60 million over 10 years. And when he was asked the question, how do you handle all of that fame? This was in 2008. He said, well, there's surely got to be something more to it than this. Well, there was. But you take a question like that, and you realize, people are not satisfied with just I don't care how much money you've got. People are not satisfied with just that. There's got to be something more than that. And if you take the question, and if it has any spiritual significance at all, then you better believe there's something more to it than just that. And we need to see that. And if we don't, then we're of all men most miserable. So we see the need for God. And we fill our lives with things that make a difference. Things that matter. All right? That's how you're wired for eternity, because you see and you know you need something more than the here and now. Now, I'm going to ponder this with you. In this list back here in verses 2 through 8, long list of things here. I'm looking at verse 5, the latter part of verse 5. You see it? There's a time to embrace, and there's a time to refrain from embracing. You see that? Now, I know that word embrace has a physical connotation to it. I know. There's a time to embrace and time to refrain from it. But at the same time, very often we will use that word embrace metaphorically. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean that we embrace ideas, concepts, beliefs, what have you. We embrace those things. Okay. That means you accept them. You take them in. And so we embrace those things. And then there are times when we don't embrace those things. So in truth, there is a time to embrace. There's a time for you to embrace the gospel, to embrace the good news of Jesus, to embrace the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior, to embrace the good news that will save your soul. That's why Jesus said, he that heareth and believeth and is baptized shall be saved. That's embracing. And there's a time to do that. And that time is always, and that time is now. Time to embrace it. But then the writer said there's a time to refrain from embracing. In other words, and if I take that metaphorically, then I might think, well, okay, there's a time when you ought not to embrace certain things, You don't have to embrace everything. Don't embrace everything you hear. It's like in 1 John 4 and verse 1, he said, beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, test the spirits, whether they be of God. Why? Because many false prophets have gone out into the world. You don't embrace just everything, even if it sounds good. But you embrace the truth, and it'll make all the difference in your world. So I'm leaving that with you. There's a time to embrace the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that time for you is now, while we stand and sing to encourage you.